So this is the first equation we've got to worry about, right? And we're on slide 16 here. And again, all this means is take the probabilities times the returns, multiply them, and then just add all three of them up, right? Look, 1, 2, 3. And you get an expected return of 10%, right? Okay, so if anybody doesn't understand that, let me know. All right. We move on. All right, so the variance is defined as the expected squared deviation from the mean. Now, if you need help with this, if you have a probability book, you could either go on, you could review it, or go on Google and type, how to some primers on variance, or go up on YouTube. I'll try to find a YouTube on variance. All right, and all you do is take the return minus the expected return you just calculated. You subtract one from the other, right? You see that? And then you square it. So basically, remember the expected return we calculated was this equation here, right? So simply what you got to do is basically take the sum now of the probability times the return minus the expected return squared, okay? So, forgetting about everything to the left of the equal, just take the probability, multiply it by each return, but first you subtract the expected return of 10% you calculated, right? And you notice you square this thing in parentheses, right? And then you add up all three of them, right? Because there's three returns, right? All right, now, that's the variance. If you want the standard deviation, you just take the square root of the variance, okay? So take the square root of the variance, and you can use a calculator or Excel for this. And now, just be careful. I don't know if these definitions of variance and standard deviation are built into Excel. Excel has a different version without probabilities, okay? I'm just telling you to be careful if you hunt around in Microsoft Excel. It's not the same version. There's a couple different types of variances and standard deviations. So variance and standard deviation will both give you measures of the risk of a probability distribution, okay? So, so that's important to know. So, by the way, I'm on page, I believe it's 329 in your book. I'm on page 329 in your book, okay? That's where you'll find some of this stuff, okay? Okay, so for this company that we talked about, I forget the name, BFI or something, that was the name. The variance and the standard deviation are as shown here. And if you go through this calculation, you come up with the variance is 0.045 or 4.5%, and the standard deviation is 21.2%. So an important point to know here is that in finance, the standard deviation is the true definition of volatility, right? So I'm going to highlight that in red for you, and I'll bold that all, right? And so that's important. So you'll notice here the standard deviation is in the same units as the return themselves, right? So, all right, so let me save that if you don't mind. So I highlighted that. All right, so let's look at an example here, okay, of expected return and volatility. So here's another stock, AMC. It's equally likely to have a 45% return or a minus 25% return. What are its expected return and volatility? Here, right? Okay, so when you saw the words equally likely, you know what that meant, right? 50% chance, right? So you notice here, here's the expected return that we talked about. The sum of the probabilities times the return. 50% times 0.45 plus 50% times minus 25% chance, right? And the expected return is 10%, right? So you're given, now when they said equally likely, you had to know they meant a 50% chance of each, okay? So we got the expected return. All right, so to get the standard deviation, we got to get the volatility, okay? I mean, we got to get the variance, I'm sorry. We got to get the variance. So we use this equation again here, right? And, you know, and let me see if I can highlight that. I don't know if it'll let me highlight that equation. No, that's an equation, so it won't let me highlight it, right? So, all right. So the variance is then would be, you notice how we just subtracted off the expected return in each case. Okay, so that gives us the variance. And then the volatility or standard deviation is the square root of the variance, as I said. So we take the square root of the variance, take the square root of that. You see, use your calculator or your phone for that matter, and you'll get the standard deviation. This is your risk or volatility. So let me highlight that. All right. I'll make that red. Make that bold. And we'll save that. Okay. Can't do that to these. These are equations, so. Okay, here's another example. Similar thing. I'll just scoot through this rather quickly, all right? So here's 3 probabilities. Here are 3 returns. And you can go through the math here. And again, if you have any problems, just email me and ask me how I got this. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to find these expected return and standard deviation in the built-in functions in Excel. However, you can do these yourself, right? You can set these up. You know, you put. Remember, I showed you put the equal sign, and you could start writing these equations. So here's the graphical version of what we just did for BFI and AMC, right? So AMC had a 50% chance of gaining 45 and losing minus 25, right? And basically, BFI had a 25, a 50, and a 25. Now, I want to go back up a slide because you can't see it in here, but I believe on AMC, the expected return was 10% too. Let me go back. And you'll notice the expected return for AMC was at 9.9%. So it's sitting on top of the blue. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's TXU. Hold on. So here's AMC, I believe, right? And it's 10%. So what I'm trying to drive at here is you don't see the red because it's on top of the blue, all right? So underneath here is a 10% expected return for AMC also. So they both have 10% expected returns, even though their distribution looks a little different. Okay, so this equation here, we're going to talk about computing historical returns, and I think we've talked about this in class already. Remember we talked about holding period return, and this is the equation that tells you the actual return, the realized return is what you got over time, okay? So, if you look at this equation real carefully, here's now this is a cash flow. Here's your final price. Now they subtract 1. So actually, let's write it the way we saw it. So this is what's called, everyone should know what this is right here, right? This is called the dividend yield, right? This is how much of a dividend you're getting on your stock, right? You see that? And this is called what? This is called the capital gain rate, okay? Whoop, this is a, there is a mistake here. Everyone should see that there's a mistake there. Hold on, I got to fix that. There's a problem there. That can't be right. Let me pause it. Okay, so I'm back. I had to fix this equation. So this should have said PT plus 1 minus PT over PT. This is the capital gain rate, okay? By the way, this should be subscript. You see t plus 1? I don't know how to... I'm having trouble making a subscript. So you see how it says pt plus 1 here? And this is t plus 1's a subscript. That should be the same thing here, all right? I'm having trouble doing that. So, in any case, I'll try to fix that later. All right, so this is the equation that gives you the realized return. And we talked about this in class. And this is the dividend yield, which is here, right? And this is the capital gain rate, which is here. Okay, so check your book and you'll see the correct that I fixed this equation. All right, I'm going to move on to part 3.